Role-playing, drugs, foreplay, cash. The jury has heard a lot about hotel nights the last few days in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, but we're going to get into some of the specifics of these wild sexual encounters and how they play into the overall charges that Diddy now faces. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hotel nights, very similar to the infamous freak-offs. They are at the center of Sean Combs' racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution trial. These extended performances, where alleged victim Jane testified that she was essentially pressured or induced into engaging in sex acts with other men in front of her partner, Sean Combs, for years. In fact, she testified that between May of 2021 and October 2023, she ended up having a hotel night every single time that she saw Sean Combs, although the defense tried to put some water on the frequency of that when they were cross-examining her. But these voyeuristic sessions that apparently even included role-playing, like a cheating partner, or even how Jane described it once that she, Combs, and his personal trainer Paul were the trifecta of Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, that's what was described in court. All of these hotel nights are going to be dissected by the jury. So we figured, why not do a deeper dive into maybe more of the specifics of these hotel nights, or these debauchery nights as they're called. So for that, let me bring on civil rights attorney Joe Richardson. Joe is not only one of my favorite people to talk to about any kind of case, but let me just tell you, not only is he great on Sidebar, he's also great on our live show that we do on YouTube where we take viewers' questions. Joe, you were phenomenal the other day. Really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody can check it out. We do it every day. Now, aside from commercial sex, right, prostitution being illegal, assuming everything was consensual, okay, just put that aside, do you think it's going to be tough to not have the jury judge Sean Combs for doing this, right? The defense is not so much saying these events didn't happen, right? They're characterizing much differently. But do you think the jury's going to judge him for it in a negative way? Or is it, hey, look, he wanted to do it. He wanted to do it. As long as it wasn't criminal, as long as it wasn't sex trafficking and federal prostitution, who are we to judge?
Yeah, I mean, there's a high standard here. Beyond a reasonable doubt is still a high standard. And I think that the length of the trial, and an irony, may allow the jury to apply more grace to P. Diddy on some level, right? And all these imperfections, particularly as it comes through that the alleged victims had imperfections themselves. They had tendencies themselves. They had things that they seemed like they wanted to do themselves, you know, even though it doesn't take much to go from voluntary to non-voluntary. Right now, the cross that they've been doing indicates that victim number 2 didn't quite know that she was a victim. She's still starting to understand that. She still feels a certain way about P. Diddy Combs. And on some level, my sense is, at the very least, that probably makes P. Diddy even, where they don't hold against him to the point of conviction that he is imperfect and that they're doing these hotel nights, etc. But it might even move towards humanizing him all the more because we have this tendency as a society that we judge the victim. So they're looking at her sideways and trying to figure out whether she's really saying that these things are going on. Is it voluntary or is it not? And it's not clear that it's not voluntary.
Hey everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. Did you know that children are being diagnosed with serious conditions like type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the research is potentially linking ultra-processed foods to all this? Yeah, well, Morgan & Morgan, they're stepping in to fight to hold these food companies accountable. With decades of experience fighting large corporations, they are ready to stand up for the families who deserve justice. So if your child under 21 has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or fatty liver disease, then visit www.forthepeople.com/food or scan the QR code on screen to learn more. Well, let's talk about it. Let's get into the specifics, because consent is the main question here, right? Was force, fraud, coercion used to pressure or induce her into engaging in these sex acts, these commercial sex acts in all different kinds of locations? So let me give you a piece of the transcript. She was asked, during hotel nights, usually what, if any, protection would you and the entertainer use during the intercourse? She answers, none. Why none? Because that was my partner's preference. And who was your partner? Sean. Did you ever ask Sean if the entertainers could wear condoms? Yes. Once or more than once? More than once. What's the first one that you can recall? The first night with Don. And what's the second time you can recall? One time at a Miami hotel. And those 2 times, how did Sean respond? He responded dismissive and kind of just almost I don't know, just in a sense like guilt tripped me out of it and that it wasn't something that he wanted to see. What was Sean's tone when he had these two conversations with you in the room? A bit condescending, like just wanted me to move on from the subject, like as if it just wasn't going to happen, so like stop asking. Now it did come out in cross-examination that he maybe did give an entertainer a condom. But Joe, how important is the protection, the condom aspect to force, fraud, coercion? Because I had a guest on yesterday who said, hey look, she's got to take responsibility. She could have refused to participate if a performer wasn't using condoms, but is it that simple?
It's not that simple because it's going to depend on how the jury takes it, and they could take it two different ways. There are discussions where she's asking about using condoms. Clearly, that's something that she expressed a preference to wanting to do. Okay, is that enough for the jury? The fact that he did not seem to approve of them. Okay, or do we go the other way when we don't see her issuing an ultimatum saying, I can't do this if we're not using condoms, or having him even emphatically say no. He seems to express a preference, but does he emphatically say no? Does he threaten her if they don't use the condoms? Is there something else that makes it more final where she can see in both actuality and perception that she either does not use the condoms or else? So if someone is inclined one way or the other, I think you have evidence that you can take from their conversations to go either way. And that's what makes this difficult.
Joe, she described in graphic detail how these sessions would end with the men, right? How they would finish up, and let's just say how Combs, according to her, didn't want her to clean up, and then they would have sex. She and Combs would have sex after. And she even testified it was these moments with Combs that were the ones that she really enjoyed. She just wanted to be with him. That level of detail, that helps her credibility, right? And it doesn't appear that the defense is saying so much that this stuff didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it does help her credibility because it makes her more vulnerable and more honest. This is not something that somebody wants to sit on the stand and talk about. She clearly loved this man. She clearly wanted to be with him, and that comes through. And so the humanization, I think, is really important. She wasn't just a machine and just a robot, et cetera. But you also can take different things from that as well. But her honesty is really important. Stepping back, if a jury is trying to figure out what all of this means, they're going to ask themselves, what is she saying? Why would she testify as to this? This seems to be nasty and crazy and maybe even a little demented, but she's owning up to it. So maybe we ought to believe her. So from that may come that the jury is more inclined to believe her.
And the defense might not even be trying to say, hey, this didn't happen like you described. They may be saying, okay, yeah, this happened, but you know what? You're being called as a prosecution witness, and the prosecution is improperly transforming your testimony into sex trafficking and racketeering. And they might not be being incredibly aggressive with her on these details. They might be accepting these details as true, but just saying it's not a sex trafficker-victim relationship, but it's a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. However, the details of this are important because you wonder if the jury's going to say, maybe how they might be looking at Cassie and saying, could she really have consented to all this? Because let's talk about the time. I think the time is very important. Here's a back and forth from the transcript. She was asked, now, after you and Sean finished having intimate time together, what would you do before starting another round, either with the same entertainer or a different entertainer? I would just take a shower and get ready for the next one. Would you put on the same outfit or a different outfit? Different outfit. Then she was asked, on average, between May of 2021 and October 2023, on average, how long did these hotel nights last? Like 24 to 30 hours. Did you ever get to sleep during a hotel night? No. How long did you stay awake for that long? I would take ecstasy. I would drink caffeine. I would just try to drink water. I would try to order myself smoothies or protein shakes. Who decided how many rounds you would do in a single hotel night? Sean. Who decided how many entertainers you would be with in a single hotel night? Sean. And she even testified that she would give the performers arousal pills or speed things up in foreplay to try to get it all done faster. There was a text that said in part, I don't throw sex in your face constantly, but the type of nights we have are nights that require everything out of me for 30 to 40 hours straight. I figured on my birthday, you would switch it up for me. So Joe, does the prolonged and elaborate nature of these go towards a lack of consent for sex trafficking purposes?
I think there's an argument that it does, right? Stepping back, it's almost like an Iron Man or Iron Woman competition where she's got to do these things that are decidedly unnatural in that she's got to be awake for more than 24 hours. Who would want to do that? She's got to have sex with 2 or 3 different men over a period of time. How do we do that? And to the point of actually using artificial stimuli to stimulate. How would it, stepping back, a jury may say, gosh, there's no way this can't be involuntary, right? But I also think that related to that, there's still this enhancer, for lack of a better term. If someone is inclined to believe her, then they can take some evidence from that. If someone is not inclined to believe her, they can also flip it around and say, well, it still seems voluntary. Now, admittedly, it's extraordinary, or maybe it's a little bit unusual, but she knows that she's with an extraordinary man who everybody wants to be with, and she really wants to please him, and she's saying things out of her mouth and wants to get a house so that they can make these things private. There's still things for someone to take it to a next place, or to the benefit of the defense. I'm looking at it as a juror, and maybe I'm just not sure. And that would go towards the defense.
She also testified about drugs, which are an important factor as well. Prosecutors have alleged that Combs used drugs to keep his victims compliant. And she testified that she took a lot of ecstasy to stay awake, that Combs gave it to her. But I can't tell if she voluntarily took it. Where do you stand on the drug aspect of it?
Yeah, I think it goes to whatever you're inclined toward. She took the drugs. It just so happens to be drugs. But if you're talking about the sex itself, there are a lot of different things that you can talk about here where you would look at it and say, well, it looks like it's voluntary, or I'm not sure that it's not. Either way, the defense wins on that, right? And so that's the risk that the prosecution has, the whole idea that if people just aren't sure, is it crystal clear that she does not want to be there, that she does not want to participate, including, but not limited to, the use of drugs, which enhances the experience. It makes the experience better, not necessarily just makes the experience tolerable. So if it just makes the experience better, then maybe she is going along with it. And so I would lean towards that actually helping the defense if you look at the surrounding facts and the situation under which she takes the drugs, and the idea that on some level, at some times, if not all the time, she seems to embrace and enjoy what's going on.
These might be, what I'm about to get into, the more clear-cut cases of a lack of consent or coercion or force or fraud. Let me go into it. So first she says on the stand, I remember it was like the first guy, then a second guy, and then after the second guy, I went to the bathroom and I just wasn't feeling well. What happened when you went to the bathroom after having 2 entertainers in this night? I threw up. What happened after you threw up? Sean came in and I told him that I just thrown up. And he was like, that's good then. You'll feel better now that you've thrown up. So let's go because the guy is here, the third guy. What happened next? And then I was with the third guy. She testified to giving these subtle clues to Sean Combs that she was tired. And he allegedly said at least once, you're not getting tired on me, are you? Let's finish strong. She testified that she cried at least 2 of these hotel nights. She testified how one man that Sean Combs brought over was sweaty and he smelled, and she claimed that she was throwing looks at Combs like she didn't want to do this. And according to her, Combs ended up having sex with her while this man was hovering over her face. Joe, does that fit more into a clear-cut case of this can't be on the up and up?
I think it gets there. Right. You know what I mean? Because clearly now, even the conditions that she has come to take for granted, like I might not be crazy about being here, but it's pleasing my man and I'm not throwing up. I might not be crazy about being here, but I got to pick the guy and he seems to be clean, etc. When some of those things go away, then yeah, I think there's an argument that there's more coercion. She's saying, finish strong. Oh, you threw up, so it'll be better. Most of us, when we throw up, we're not thinking that we want to go out and have sex, right? I think that you get more towards the coercion piece of things once you talk about these situations where she has things happen that even she doesn't expect to happen. And it's clear that he's weighing in and saying, hey, let's finish strong. This is what we want to do. And he's ignoring these things and these issues as if they aren't issues at all.
Yeah, and let me tell you this part. So if we're talking force, She describes one alleged episode where she claims Sean Combs puts her in a chokehold, punches her, kicks the doors down, invites a sex worker named Antoine over, told her to cover up her injuries before this sexual session, gives her an ecstasy pill, and told her, take this bleeping pill, you're not going to ruin my bleeping night, you better go out there. And when she said she didn't want to, he allegedly said, is this coercion? And she claimed she had to perform oral sex on Antoine. Quote, I just felt sick. I just felt like I wasn't even in my own body. I just felt disgusted. I just felt terrible. Now, Joe, I'm listening to this. I'm thinking, wow, this could be a clear-cut case of force being used to pressure her into sex acts, right? Sex trafficking. I wonder if the defense could characterize and say, did Sean Combs think this was all role-playing? I don't know. Is that a stretch?
Yeah, it might be a stretch, right? But, the defense on those very exacerbated examples, they're going to have to do some of that, right? But there is an argument that this is a bridge too far. She gets choked. Here comes P. Diddy with these physical things that apparently went on with other people, right? To the extent what's extra damaging about this is that this may remind them of what went on with other folks. It may remind them of instances of violence, etc. But she's choked. She looks a certain way physically because of the injuries, and she's still being required to do this. And he is saying more emphatically that thou shalt, you have to do this. And so, yeah, that's a little bit more like it in terms of you looking at the force part of this particular crime.
I'll tell you what's important. I think this is important. So we're talking multiple sex workers or male performers being allegedly used here. I believe we have names or nicknames like Don, Cabral, Leo, Antoine, Paul. And there was testimony about how the men were flown out and how they were paid. Like this back and forth. She was asked, do you know how Cabral got from Atlanta to each of these cities? By plane. Do you know who paid for his plane ticket? Maybe either me or sometimes Jess. Who is Jess? The travel agent. Whose travel agent? Sean's. In what cities or countries do you remember seeing Paul for these hotel nights? I remember seeing Paul in Los Angeles, Miami, and Turks. Although she did testify that he apparently booked his own travel or was already there. But she testified that she saw Combs hand cash to the male performers. She testified that Combs' security or assistants like Christina would give him cash. She testified that she helped to pick the performers and even arranged for the flights of one male performer named Sly from Atlanta to New York, and she paid him $2,000 to $4,000. She claims that she got the money from Combs. She testified how Combs arranged performers to come over too, and she testified that the assistants had set up the rooms. Now, Joe, to me, does this all help a clear-cut case of transportation to engage in prostitution? One of the charges that Sean Combs faces, he actually faces two, one with respect to Cassie and one with respect to Jane. Does this support this? Does it support maybe even racketeering as we talk about the people in his inner circle?
I would say it absolutely supports transportation. And we've talked about this before, the whole idea that if you cut away the crimes and you're looking at the possibilities related to them, you would seem to have transportation because clearly they're flying people from one place to another, arranging for people's flights. These are people that you don't otherwise know, other than for their reputation as sex workers, if that. And you're flying them out there, and then you're paying them once they get in and have them engaged in sex acts. So, yeah, I think that there's an argument there. Now, the racketeering, perhaps. I've always thought that this was more of the square peg in a round hole kind of situation. But that being said, you're still looking to show him as having a criminal enterprise, right? In the racketeering, you need the two underlying acts. And it may be that, there's a garden variety of acts that you can use to be your two underlying crimes, right? And so what it may do is help to, quote, kill two birds with one stone, for lack of a better term, in terms of being one of the underlying crimes. So, yes, I think it gets you on the road towards the racketeering. But I would say that if there was something that is, quote, easier, and I don't know that anything's easy here, one that's more clear, I like that word better, that's more clearly shown here, I think there's an argument that you show pretty well of the transportation with intent to engage in prostitution.
Joe, the defense cross-examined Jane a lot about all of this, and you talked about it. They questioned if she did this out of love and just to please her lover, Sean Combs, not necessarily being pressured as a victim of sex trafficking. She was questioned how when she got mad at him, it was a lot about, other women. So, they always talked about this as more of a relationship of jealousy and anger, not sex trafficking. There were definitely texts where she was complaining to Sean Combs about doing all of this, but still, what she allegedly kept on doing it, that she was given money, that he paid her rent, even to this day, that he pays for her lawyer. She was pressed on saying how this one hotel night in Turks and Caicos, she had 4 rounds of sex in 24 hours. That was the claim, and she claimed she was sore and crying, but then she apparently admitted she had so much fun on that trip. She testified how she helped bring in the male performers, and there were graphic messages from her being excited, enthused about the hotel nights, although she basically was like, I was just playing the part, I was just saying and doing whatever I needed to do to make Sean Combs happy. But also there was testimony about how he seemingly or allegedly gave her choice, and how they didn't always have hotel nights, and how she loved him and she didn't want to break up with him. This is a great case, and I wonder, when the jury goes back and thinks about the hotel nights, are they crime scenes or not?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, much of their back and forth between the texts, between the things that she admits, the things that she admits enjoying, et cetera, the things that intensified the experience, including the drugs, you can't help but wonder whether a juror may step back and say, you know, this looks like a consensual relationship that has some drama, some high highs and some low lows. Where's the criminal enterprise? Where's the conspiracy? Where's the non-voluntary nature of this whole thing? Where's the coercion if she's somebody that actually has her own business and she has the ability to potentially support herself? Where's the coercion if she's saying, to intensify the experience, let's get our own place so that we can do this at our place, and that I want to please you and I want to intensify. It's almost like she's using the experience as a building block to intensify it and make it better. That's not typically what you do with an experience that you don't like. At least that's one perception of it. There's the other perception of it as well. But I think that the risk that they run, and the defense hasn't presented their case yet, by the way. This is what's coming from Cross, okay? And so based on that, you got to wonder whether the defense is really going to be in the driver's seat in order to humanize P. Diddy and say, hey, this was some crazy, freaky sex. We admit that. There's a whole lot of baby oil around here, but it doesn't make it a criminal enterprise. So from that standpoint, I think the defense has a lot of reason to be optimistic. That's why they spent so much time on her, breaking her down, her stuff, her text, her words.
I'll tell you one thing, hotel nights, freak-offs, role-playing, baby oil, it definitely changed our whole perception of Sean Combs in a very, very big way. I think that we can all agree on that. Joe Richardson, so great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it. Always, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.